warning.
This meeting is being recorded.
And on that note, we'll hand over to Christiana. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. So welcome everyone. So this morning we're going to be talking about portfolio-based assessment, so form of continuous assessment with Microsoft ecosystem. So let's get started. So I've divided my presentation into sort of three parts. So we're going to talk briefly about sort of the why, the rationale for portfolio assessment. I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly, and then we move on to the how, so the portfolio design, and finally the exciting stuff, that's the portfolio build and technology that I've used for this demo. So thinking about, hello? Okay. Thinking about the why, we start thinking about why we would like to use a portfolio of continuous assessment to assess our students. So I've put a couple of lines here on my screen. So by focusing on the final product, we may overlook the stages of learning that precede the product. So I think we've all felt at some point that assessment has its limitations. Sort of exams and coursework tend to focus on the product, even though we as our courses place emphasis on the process of learning. So another thing that leads from that is the idea that continuous assessment makes invisible learning visible. And we're not, in this case, we may not want to showcase student products. We may want to focus on the process of learning. So, and get a view into the learning process, how the student gets to the final product. So when we take this process of learning, we bring it sort of to the center. It kind of shifts the focus away from the final product. And if we are focusing on it, potentially the students will be more inclined to focus on it too and benefit from learning about how they learn and thinking more deeply about the process of learning. The learning approach is constructivism, that you probably are familiar with, what says that learning happens most effectively when students construct knowledge from themselves, by themselves, rather than having it presented to them. And in addition, the social sort of dimension of constructivism, constructing knowledge through dialogue and interaction with their peers and with their lecturers, so that the feedback loop that's implied in there. And finally, the idea of student agency that suggests this when students have choice, their motivation, their engagement increases, and it also brings forward that recognition that learning happens beyond the classroom. So these are just very briefly the rationale behind it. I have a reference list if you are interested in learning more about the research associated with portfolio and continuous assessment. I have a reference list at the end, and also I've shared with the team a little spreadsheet with a couple of articles, sort of a mini database that you can, they will share with you if you guys want to sort of learn more about this. Okay, so the idea here is that we want to build this tool of assessment for learning. And this is sort of my favorite definition of assessment for learning, which is assignments that fulfill the traditional role of assessment, while at the same time provide an opportunity for students to learn as they complete the assessment. And because we are looking at the process, as I mentioned before, the assessment needs to differentiate itself from the traditional assessment, which is product assessment. But at the same time, it needs to be graded, it needs to count for something. There is considerable time and energy involved in building a portfolio, and if students don't get recognition, they simply don't engage with it. At the same time, if it's just another assessment, students are very strategic, they may not engage in a similar way. So it's really hard to find that balance where you capture that work, the process side of it, the reflections, but also offer an objective value. So potentially we're going to try and use the technology a bit for that as well. So moving on to the how. How do we design a portfolio? And this is not something groundbreaking or anything new. We're going to refer to our good old friend, constructive alignment, that says this that you probably are familiar with. All components of the teaching system. the objectives, the content, and the assessment are all aligned to each other. Give you a moment for that. So with this in mind, what I did was, on what a good strategy could be to determine our objectives, what we want students to learn. We're going to design the portfolio so that it allows the students to develop and evidence the learning points that we want to focus on, the objectives, and then we devise the marking criteria to assess how well students meet these outcomes, because we want to make it count. All the work involved has to count for something, like I mentioned. Okay, so I made, for the purpose of this presentation, I built a sort of a demo portfolio. This is a fictional portfolio for a fictional course that I built for you. So let's have a quick look at it. So my fictional imaginary in my dreams, it's a credit-bearing in-sessional course that lasts for 12 weeks and has a flipped learning. It's delivered by flipped learning, has an asynchronous online lesson and a synchronous live lesson once a week. So like I said, fictional. And I look at my objectives, content, and criteria. And for this fictional course, I thought these could be some objectives that I wanted my portfolio to focus on. I'm not going to read them through. Just give you a moment. And looking at these objectives, I then devised some content that I thought would allow students to evidence these objectives, and this is the content that I again put together. And then, in sort of a throwback to my Delta times, I don't know if you did this on your Delta, I certainly did. You cross-check the content with the objectives and make sure that your content reflects your objectives. So I did a little sort of checking whether the objectives are mirrored in the content. And then I checked if the objectives are sufficiently fleshed out through the content. And I came through this sort of, looks like a well-balanced objectives. Obviously, you could have completely different objectives and completely different content, because you would do it for your own course and your own context. Okay. After that, my next step would be to devise marking criteria for every single content of the course, the portfolio. And for each one of them, I went with red, amber, green, gold sort of marking criteria. I don't want to give a number to it. I want to have this sort of marking criteria. And then I wrote marking criteria for all of these. So I'm going to show you the Word document that I made. So for the study plan, the online lesson, the extension task, you want to devise marking criteria for all of these. I'll bring this back once we're in the tech side of it. You'll see how this fits with the Microsoft side of it. Okay, so you write this down, how well students are evidencing that you want them to show through their content. Okay. And then we get to the real good stuff, which is the tech, the portfolio build. So first, some practicalities. So portfolio is an expensive component of the course. And when I say expensive, I mean in terms of lecturer time. I always think lecturer time is kind of like our budget, and it costs our budget, because it doesn't matter how well it's designed and conceived and implemented. If it's not marked, if it doesn't count for something, students don't get feedback, there's almost no point. They need to get something out of it, and making lecturers mark and give feedback costs time. So that's kind of my second research question, inverted commas, can the tech help us? Can it turn our well-designed and beautiful assessment instruments into something that can be realistically implemented? And that's where our Microsoft ecosystem, I believe, would be helpful for us. So here are the apps that I've used. I've used class Teams for all communication and remote synchronous teaching if relevant. It might not have maybe face-to-face teaching. And we want to use the class notebook for our portfolio platform if as they mentioned before, I am a certified OneNote enthusiast, and I believe that it's very helpful. So these are the two basic ones. With this, you can just build your portfolio. I then added some nice to have things. So I used Sway and Forms to create that online asynchronous lesson that I mentioned to you, but this is a very light touch portfolio because this is, if you remember, an in-sessional 12-week course, so 12 lessons. If you're doing a pre-sessional, maybe you need something a bit more intense because there is a lot more content delivered. So I use these two to make a very light touch online lesson. I'll show you in a bit. I've used lists for a collaborative glossary. Again, this is just a nice to have thing. I've always wanted to have a collaborative glossary and try it out with students, and I've never quite found an app for it. And I think lists would work really well. I'll demo it later. And then for the marking, we're going to use Teams assignments, and that's the thing that's really going to be helpful, and it's going to expedite the whole process. And then also another nice to have, you could use Stream for screen recording and doing video feedback. Advantage of these is that these are all different apps, but this is all one thing. It's Microsoft 365. It doesn't require students to log in several times. It doesn't require lecturers to log in several times because you also need to make it efficient for the lecturers. They all integrate very well, and all this can be accessed in one single access point. That is Teams. We've heard some really nice presentations, Sig, about decluttering the online classroom, and I 100% agree with that view. The thing that I like about this, even though this looks like a lot of things, this is really just one thing because it's the Microsoft ecosystem working together and just in one single access point. Okay. So now I'm going to take you to Teams and a little demo the thing. So this is the class Teams that I created for us, my fictional team. And then from here, you can access all the things that I mentioned before, namely the class notebook. Now you do want to create a Teams that is a class Teams. Either a staff Teams or another kind of team won't work with this sort of plan because the class Teams has got some bunch of goodies here that are going to help us set this up. And the first thing is the class notebook, which I'm going to show from here. You can access these things on the app or online, but everything can be used just from the single app. So very good if your students are not super tech fluent, because then everything is in one single platform. So the class Teams has all these useful sections by default. Your teacher only section, which is just for the teacher, and the student sections. As you add students, this stuff gets created automatically, and all these settings are also done automatically. So I'm going to look at the teacher only section first. This is where you are going to create your portfolio materials before you give them to students. Okay, you're just still in the building time, and you're just creating your portfolio. So these are my portfolio materials. If you remember, I said it's 12 weeks. So I've created one for each week. Let me make it a little bit bigger. So this is again my fictional sort of course content. Starting in week 1, we are now in our imaginary course. We are now in week 5. Okay, so this is what I want students to work on during the week, their plan, their online lessons, extension tasks for the class glossary, etc. So I'm just going to show you these items 3 and 4 before we move on. The forum, which is just a it's just a channel for discussion. So I put my forum here. Got topic. 2 of my students have participated. Although judging by the text, I think they plagiarized. They've answered my questions. You put a deadline. You very clearly say what you want them to do, and they have done it. So back to my notebook. Another thing that I've got to share with you is the glossary. Okay, I've got a link here. And again, what I would like is for students to all contribute to a class glossary between 2 to 5 words every week. I think this would be great. And I put the link on here. Remember, this is still in my working area. I haven't distributed this to students yet. I'm just building it. And I've put it to create the glossary. I've used lists, like I said, and I've put a shortcut in here. So students can access it again through Teams. And 2 of my students have participated. Okay, so got them here. I know which student's done it. And when they want to add a word, you just create new, and that you can configure all these rows and boxes. You can have different things if you want them to do write something different. You have this sort of drop down, and who's done it. They write their names, they save, and then you can check all this stuff. Okay. And going back one last time, I'm going to show you the online lesson. So when they click on here, the online lesson, I've built it with Sway, very simple sort of online lesson. I've just literally got everything from this, from Bailey. And you can do something like that. Build the deadlines. You can have like couple things where you've got a question for them, and then they click through to check the answer. You could do sort of a slideshow where you would highlight the paragraph. This is just what was on the book. None of this is my own creation. I just adapted the book into a more sort of colorful and visual way to present it. You can then embed a quiz in here where they would complete the task, maybe sort of organize a paragraph, do some multiple choice, and get some multiple choice here, and then they would submit. So you get some activities in there, and then maybe some more of this sort of click through, and then you tell them what the next steps are. Very useful. Put the links back to things, helping them with their sort of housekeeping as well. And if they click here to see my timetable, this takes them back to Teams again. This is the only one that doesn't include in Teams, but it's just a link to the outside. They don't need to log in again because it's all Microsoft. Okay. So back on Teams, there is another sort of really helpful feature, which is the home page. And again, this is only available in the class Teams. So your homepage is just a SharePoint page that you can configure with information, sort of housekeeping for the student. You can tell them a little bit about the course. All their assignments come in here. You can schedule your meetings. I haven't scheduled the meetings just because otherwise they would go onto the calendar of my students, and they've already have enough things on their calendar. I didn't want to overcrowd. But if you share it here, then the links are here for them to join. So really easy access point. You can put links to sort of books in your library. So that would be like your Bibliu or something else, just to make it easier for students to access. And if students have a question, this is a really nice sort of thing you can put in, embed something if students have a question. It's a really easy way to contact the lecturer. So this is all embedded. Again, we are still on Teams. Okay, so another nice feature of the class Teams. And another nice feature of the class Teams, speaking of which, is the classwork section. It's relatively new, this one. And it's almost like your VLE, where you add all your classwork week on week or per modules. It says they call it modules. So these are weeks 1 to 5 and week 6 here is a draft that I've set up to show you guys. So here you would put some information, a link to the online lesson, and the assignment that I'm going to show you in a moment. And you can create them as a draft, you can copy them, you can reuse them as well. Once you set this up once, it's quite easy to reuse. Okay, so I've got this one as a draft. If you add a module, you will put it here. I've got already my link, and then I will also attach in here the assignment, which is the next thing I'm going to show you. So the assignment is where you make sure that the portfolio page that you created, if you remember, it was on the class notebook and it was in the teacher only section, ready to be distributed to students, but not yet in their own sections. Right now, it's still only available to my lecturers. Okay, so if you remember, it's still here in the teacher only section, all our pages that we want to put in the students' own sections, but we haven't done that. And Teams is going to do that for us more or less automatically. So I'm going to get page from week 6 into each of the students' own sections. So back to assignments. So you would create a new assignment and then you'd write a title. You write any information that you think is relevant. I've attached the link to my online lesson by going attach link. Okay, and I'm going to also attach that page that I've created. So attach from your class notebook, and it's going to find the materials that are already in your class notebook. So in your teacher only section, in your portfolio, and we wanted to do week 6. So we've attached week 6. Okay, and where do we want this to come? It's going to go into the student section, into the tab called portfolio. Attached in here. So when I click assign, this is going to be posted in each of the students' own sections, and I don't have to do that work. Okay, so it's ready to post. We're going to look at some of the settings here on this side. We've got your deadline. So when do you want this to be done by? And then students will get reminders that this has been set up for them. They will also get reminders closer to the time, which is very useful and saves us from checking. We only need to check when it's time to mark. And for this class, for all students, and you can link it to the module, and that was the bit in the course classwork part. And this means it's going to get attached automatically to that module that I've created. Okay. Next, we are going to look at our rubric. So remember, I showed you our marking criteria some time ago, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this rubric that I've created, I'm going to copy it into Teams. So it's going to be ready here when it's time to mark, which is the next bit I'm going to demo for you. So I've copied all this. You can edit it. It's just a copy-paste job. Once you've written it in your sort of Word document or Excel spreadsheet, you then copied it into here. Cancel that. And you can save that mark scheme. So the mark scheme is associated with the assignment. Very useful for students as well. So if you write it in student-friendly language, that is useful for the lecturers and also for students to know what they need to do if they want to achieve. If you want to achieve the gold or the green. Okay, and you also have here the grade scheme. So another thing that Teams has in there, our grade scheme, I have that red, amber, green, gold, and you create that and you can set it as default. So you can edit that as well. So I've decided that this was the percentage. They only get gold if they score over 90, but you can change this and you don't have to call it red, amber, green, gold. You can call it excellent, good, satisfactory, or poor, or you can just use points. I've decided to hide the points so they don't know how many points they have. They know they only get this mark. And when I set this as default, this means this is all ready for you. There's a big sort of, you kind of front load the setup, but then it's quite easy to reuse and do it again. Okay, so I've got my marking criteria, my grade scheme, all I need to do is assign. Now all my students are going to get a notification that this has been assigned for this time, and the OneNote page that was in the teacher only section is going to get distributed into all their sections. I only have 2 students, but if I had 10, 15 students, it saves me time distributing pages. So let's assign. It's saying that my assignment is not visible in classwork because it was still in draft stage. So I'm going to continue. All right, that's been posted in my classwork. My week 6 is still in draft stage, but as you can see, it's got the portfolio now attached. So I'm going to publish it as well. Okay, so students can access all of this. They just got a notification that it's been posted week 6, and when it's due, they've got notification in the bell area, and they can also find it through here. And then in the notebook, it usually takes a bit to update. I'm not sure it will already be there, but it might. Okay, so in my student section, there we go. That's here now. So they've already done weeks 1 to 5, and week 6 has just been posted for them. So quite efficient, saves us a bit of time setting this up. Okay, so that was the demo of creating an assignment. Now we want to mark an assignment. So we're going to go there and see if there's anything to mark. I think there is. Okay, so I've got this assignment is upcoming, is the one that I just set up. And this assignment is due 9 a.m. on the 15th, but I know my students are very diligent and they've already done it. So I'm going to mark it. Okay, so they've done it. I've decided that they've done it, but they've not turned in yet, but I can do it on their behalf. So if I click on here, the student, I can take action in student view over here in this area. And I'm going to turn in on their behalf. So, very useful. Sometimes students do that and then they forget to turn in. So you can do that on their behalf. And I'm going to do my other student as well. Okay. Right. So they've turned in, and now I'm going to mark it. I'm just going to click on students' work, and I'm going to see the work here on this area. Now, imagine this is all filled in. Obviously, I didn't ask my teachers who have kindly volunteered to be students to actually do the work. So this is blank, but just imagine it's filled in. Okay, so I'm going to mark it. So here's my rubric, right? And here's the marking criteria that I've set up. It's going to turn up in here. Okay, so study plan, I'm going to look at it and say, wow, this is great. It's amazing. This is my high achieving student. I'm going to say that it's great. It's gold. The online lesson, it was clear evidence. And the extension task was okay. I'm going to give it green. It wasn't expertly structured. It was well structured. And the live lesson, they've attended, they've participated. They had their cameras on. For the discussion forum, they were great. You've seen that they've done it. And the glossary participated with insightful and comprehensive definitions. So amazing, great work. And the reflective text was also good. So I've marked it all, and that's it. I'm done. Okay, so I'm going to click done. And they got an overall green mark in here. And I can return it to the student, so the student's getting a notification that it's been marked. Now, if you remember, I mentioned to you that Stream has got a really good and it's sort of very easy and clean screen recording. So you could get lecturers to mark and record themselves at the same time and give feedback as they are marking, and then send the video to the student. So you can just add the student's name and share it with them. They get a notification on their Outlook that they got a little video with the feedback. Again, everything very well integrated and just ready to send to students. So I'm just going to mark, I've just marked this student. Now I'm going to mark another student. So I just click on next student and I'm ready to mark the next one. So it's going to come up in here. Click on my rubric. And this student has been consistently good, so just really high achieving. I'm going to give her an excellent mark. Obviously, you would have to pay attention to what I'm just doing a demo. When you're actually marking, you would have to be looking at what you're doing. But because you've got the criteria to really help you, and it's just a question of clicking through, it would be the reflective text. Maybe it was just green. It wasn't 100%. Okay, so that's done. And I'm ready to return, and the student achieved gold. So I'm ready to return it. Okay, so because I only have 2 students, I am done with all my marking. That was really quick and easy and really good. So now I want to see how my class is doing and how my students are progressing. So I'm just going to close this, and still in Teams, I'm going to go to grades and check how my class is doing. Okay, so I can see that starting in week 1, started not very well, but it's really improving. Okay, 68, even though she's got a gold in this one, she had a couple of ambers and just a green, so she isn't quite there yet. She's on 50%. The student didn't start very well because maybe the beginning of the course they had some difficulties, they didn't engage, but they've got a chance to improve. So the student only doesn't see the percentage because I've barred them from seeing the percentage, but I can see the class average, and I can see the average for the week and how each student is going. So also really good to keep track. And then you can export this to Excel if you need reporting. So you've got a really good sort of record keeping embedded in here if you need to. I know in terms of in-sessional or courses that are not credit bearing, we have some flexibility on how we report. We don't always have to be on the institution's VLE, or pre-sessional sometimes have their own sort of little way of operating. You don't always have to be on the VLE. So if you, but you still need to do the reporting. So this is a really good sort of way of doing that. It's very practical. So yeah, I think that are the bits that I have to show to you. You have other things here. We've got this reflect. It's a really, it's a nice way to keep in touch with the students. You can choose some questions and ask them, how have you been feeling this week? And you can create a check-in. How did this work feel for you? How are you feeling about your essay or something else? And you can post it and the students can react to that. But those are just extra bits. The basic here is the class notebook, Teams, and the assignments part that you can create. Now, I've shown you all this inside Teams, but you have the notebook that you can use on the app. It's a lot faster to create materials and to create content. And then it's just the same that is on Teams. So I think that's all I have for you, and I would be very happy to take questions if you have any.
Christiana, there are a few in the chat area here. So if we go up a ways, I think the first one came in from Jonathan Smith. It seems that by using Office 365, you perhaps don't need a VLE. There's no point in having two platforms doing the same thing. How would your institutional IT or TEL support teams feel about abandoning the VLE?
Yes, good point. Well, if there might be some things where you still want to use a VLE. So suppose you have, for example, a pre-sessional foundation course, and then you need more sort of a stronger online asynchronous component. And then because Sway and forums can only go so far, they do a little bit, but potentially you would have like Moodle quizzes or Moodle or online lessons that you want to embed in the VLE, and you can embed, instead of putting the link to the Sway, you would have a link to the VLE, and there would be another way of keeping track, and you would potentially use both. But then the student facing, they would only look at this. How would the institution like that? Like I said, some non-credit bearing courses, the institution might not really be interested in that. And from my experience, I know the pre-sessionals don't always operate within the same constraints of the subject courses, and they sort of have their little bubble. So potentially there is scope for that, but on the other hand, if you can't, you can't. However, you can still extract the scores and do the reporting. Sometimes the institution and the department wants the reporting at the end of the day, and if you're giving them the data, that's great.
Okay. Evangelia asks, but how could you give personalized feedback and comments when marking?
Good. Yes, you can give feedback. I actually skipped that. Thanks for reminding me. So when you're marking, there's also an option to add personalized feedback. So along with the criteria, can I do this one? Along with the criteria, just under where you select the marking criteria, there is a box for feedback. So you can have written feedback in there, but you can also add feedback in here in this box where you would add personalized feedback. But when you're marking in the different items of the portfolio under, there is some personalized feedback boxes. However, I would really encourage teachers to try video feedback. I think it's so useful. You could also have weekly tutorials, one-to-ones, where you would discuss the portfolio with the student. Or you could do video feedback, where as you mark, you do sort of a think aloud kind of exercise, that as you are marking, you are saying, well, I'm going to give you a green because you didn't do whatever, and in order to achieve a goal, you should really try to, and you're just thinking as you're marking, and the video is going to capture your thoughts and send to students. I think students really value getting videos from their teachers. At least I've read some articles where it's been reported that students really value that sort of interaction.
This generation in particular, I think, really respond to video. The other part, though, was comments. Is there a way to actually highlight a piece of the document and connect a comment directly to say, a highlighted segment?
Yes, so when you're marking, I just went really quickly through the marking criteria, but you have the page in front of you, so you can actually type on it. You can mark it, and you can also, there's an option, if you have one of those tablets that allow you to write over, you can also mark it sort of with hand comments. So yeah.
Okay. Then Jonathan notes, for me, an issue is that Office 365 is customizable at the institutional level, but less so school or even program level. Whereas with a VLE, it's much easier for a course builder to hide or customize features. The question here is, Office 365 is very highly specified, which is great if you have strong digital skills. But for many academic staff and for some students, he's just wondering, is it maybe a little too complex at times? Have you had much experience with people finding it too complex to work with?
I'm not sure I would agree with that. I feel that it's true that the class teams comes with all these components that are already there. So you've got the classwork and the grades, and you can customize a lot of it. So you can add marking criteria, or you can customize the grading scheme. I'm not sure it is as complex. I'm not sure. It's hard to say. I really like technology, so for me it's quite engaging. But in my experience, I've had the experience of working with lecturers that are maybe less tech fluent, and they have reported finding, for example, OneNote easy to use. And again, because it's all in one place, I think it's also the responsibility of the course, the module leaders or the course leaders, to really train the lecturers and make sure there is support available for them, and have, for example, notes on how to mark. So, for example, you would have instructions for tutors on how to do it, that can be located in the same area. You would maybe have a page on here where you explain very clearly, you make walkthrough. So there's also learner, in the same way that you do learner training, you need to do lecturer training and staff training as well.
Okay. Another question here from Felicia. What if the student's work falls not in a particular band, but some criteria across different bands? I suppose for me, I would probably add just another line, maybe if I wanted that option to be able to do, some features of gold, but some features of green or something like that. But is there another way? Can you highlight two, or are you held to just the one?
You highlight one, but it's one for each of the elements. So each element of the portfolio would be mostly on the green band or on the amber band. The students will also be able to see the feedback for each of the components.
Okay.
So yeah, sometimes you would think that suppose the study plan, it could start really well, but then the students forgot to do the study plan for example, they only did Monday and Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is just a couple of lines. So you'd have to balance it out.
Right. Okay. Claire says, thank you for a very informative presentation. I can see the benefits of this for the portfolio assessment for pre-sessional. Can you set up one large class for the whole cohort and then split it into individual classes? Or does each teacher need to set up their own class portfolio, etc.?
I guess you can choose. I would recommend setting up a class for each sort. It depends how big is your group. I've worked with a class where we would have a total of 26 students split into 3 classes, and maybe you can manage that in one group. But if you've got all these, because you also then want to have the different marks and the progression of the students split by class. So I would recommend creating a team for each class. And one of the useful things is that you can copy, once you've set up, for example, the classwork for class number 1, you can then create by duplicating. So you're in the teams for the other class, and you can just duplicate the bits that you've done. And you can do the same with the notebook, so it saves time setting it up.
I was going to ask that if you're really far ahead and you have your whole class set up for the semester, I suppose you could just duplicate the class as well too. But
yeah,
that's the unicorn we all look for, isn't it? Thank you for an informative. Thank you for an informative and interesting presentation. This is really great to set up to use. How many students could you use this with, so that it is manageable? How many students in a class do you think is kind of the upper limit?
I think that's sort of an institutional constraint. How big are your classes? You can have a class of 50 students, and then that's your class. You just have 50 students. I think what the administrators and the course leaders need to be mindful, is it feasible? Can a lecturer actually do feedback with a class of 50? Maybe if you have a large class, then potentially you can't have continuous
Yeah.
assessment. But that's an institutional constraint because, like I said, portfolio is expensive.
Right. In terms
So
of
just a
teacher
note
time.
on that
Yeah.
reusing, when you add a module here, you
Mhm.
can reuse one that's existing, and then you can create a copy. And it doesn't have to be from the same team. So for example, you can find it in a different team and create it on here. And the same for the assignments. You can create assignments that are duplicates from assignments that exist in previous other teams. You can even create sort of your template team, which you then copy across to all the other different teams. And you make all your updates in your template team, and that one is always ready to go. And then you can duplicate it as you go along.
Okay.
That's just something I thought now.
So one question from Ying, Stream can be used for video feedback? That was the question. Was it's Stream that you use? Sorry.
Is Stream, sorry, say again?
Is it Stream that you use for the video feedback?
Yeah, we can use it for
Okay.
video feedback. So it's got an update really recently. So Stream here, and you've got screen recording here, and yeah, it just records your screen and your camera, and as you are giving feedback, you are then telling the students what you think. So very, very, very handy.
Okay, we
don't
a few more.
use it at the moment. Like I said, this is all a fictional course.
Okay, next question is from Susan. How do you integrate the classwork tab with the classwork within the class notebook? Does that make sense?
The classwork tab is mostly for, it's mostly for sort of collating all the resources you want students to focus on. So that you don't have things distributed, like your final sort of single access point. If you've told students where things are, but they are immediately going to forget where they are, and they're going to ask you where it is. So this can be a good sort of access point. If you can't find it, it's all in there. And again, it's also useful for lecturers, because you are giving your lecturers a course that is ready with all the things in place, everything they need is in place in there.
Okay. O'Brien wrote, I would be interested to know if there are still issues with lag in class notebook, delay in completed work, comments being viewed by tutor or student. Apparently, they abandoned it in 2020 for this reason, but perhaps it has improved.
Yeah, it's got a lot of updates since, and also you might have seen that we've got like the new teams. There's been an update also recently. If you've worked with teams, you probably have noticed that. And one of the things they make a big deal about is that it's being faster. So it's meant to be faster and have less lag. And another thing that may be related with that, Microsoft Teams and Microsoft in general, they get a lot of updates. They get updates all the time. And if we want to keep up to date with that, I really recommend simple resource, just YouTube. And there is a particular YouTuber who works for Microsoft, so it's not a random person, called Mike Thorson. So this person is a Microsoft employee, and he'll give you, as you can see, how to use Microsoft Stream, 8 new features. One of them was the screen recording. It came out 2 days ago, and it's always updating. So you always get the most recent updates from Microsoft. As you can imagine, they are always improving, and they're really invested in this Microsoft for Education. So I can imagine that more and more updates will be there. And if you want to know more all about the new teams that that is slimmer and simple. Yeah, I'm not sure if it is actually 100%. We tried it in our institution, but then we had to roll back to Teams Classic, as they call it, because there was an error. But yeah, it looks like it's going to just keep going forward.
Okay.
So
Jonathan,
I really recommend this this website, this YouTuber, and I'm going to put that on the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
I just wanted to jump in here just to mindful of time. So if anyone does need to shoot off, I appreciate we're at 11, and it was just going to say thank you very much for coming along, and thank you to Christina. We will stick around. I know people have a hard out at 11 or on the hour, but we'll stick around for a little bit to field more questions. And I was just thinking, Christiana, would you be okay to, because this seems to have generated quite a lot of discussion and questions. Would you be okay with, we can put your
Sure.
university contact details below the video when we publish this on the site, and anyone can get in touch?
Yes, please.
Oh,
That's absolutely
great.
fine.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Brilliant. Okay, well, this is the soft close. So just to say, if anyone does need to go, great to see you, and just let you know details of our next event, which will be with the EAP for Social Justice SIG. It'll be a collaborative thing happening at the end of February. Details about that will be coming soon. And just to point everyone in the direction of our SIG site. So Christiana's video will be here. There's also the call for webinars proposals. So if you'd like to discuss with us about a future proposal for an idea for webinars, then please get in touch. But that's all there. And the final thing I was just going to mention before everyone drops out, Deanne, attendance certificates. Are you able to drop one in the box?
I've just dropped a link to the attendee certificate in now, yes. So just save a copy to your computer, write your name in, and everyone has their individualized copy.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Right.
Yeah,
So
if you'd like to also share that, sorry, if you also like to share the spreadsheet with the research, if anyone is interested to sort of get some, always get some research to back your claims. If you want to move on to portfolio, it's always useful to have lots of references on your proposal.
I'll put that in the box now, and it will be on the website as well. But yeah, sorry to interrupt, guys. I was just to say thanks to everyone who does need to go. But as I say, we'll stick around for a few minutes. So Deanne, if there's any more questions, keep them coming.
Okay. So there was a question about whether or not Turnitin can be integrated with Office 365. Someone responded that it can be, but that the institution needs to pay for this. So have you had any experience with working with Turnitin in the Office 365 environment?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
Like I said, the way that I envision this particular portfolio, but like I said, there are many ways of doing it. It's because it focuses more on the process, potentially you maybe don't want to run so many things through Turnitin, because but I understand, like, if student has written, I don't know, a reflective text, you might want to run it through Turnitin.
Yeah.
However, you will also have that, you also need to have that knowledge of, is the reflection matching what the student really is like, which I think is more important. For example, is the student saying that he or she is an amazing progress and is really enjoying the class? However, you know that the student isn't making progress and enjoying the class, because you know the student in the classroom. So there's that sort of, you would probably assess it on that angle. It doesn't match the student profile. So it almost doesn't matter if it's plagiarized, because you're going to give it a red because it doesn't match what the student is like.
And I don't know about you, but I have much more issues with AI these days than plagiarism. But for us, I know I use Google Classroom, if you don't mind, that in a similar way as this, as well as Google Drive. But we still put our summative assessments through Turnitin through our VLE. So yeah. Then there is some comments in here, which are very interesting. So we will make sure that you get the comments in the chat history, Christiana, when this is over. I hope I'm not missing anyone. Oh, Joseph is asking, will Valley be moving over to Teams too instead of Zoom? Well, we're kind of up to our individual members, I think, for the most part, aren't we, Phil? You still have access to Zoom, so we are using Zoom under your account, but my institution has lost it. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, we're using Zoom because I've been set up the links and we're a Zoom uni, but Teams doesn't like me anyway. I have tried and I just keep running into brick walls. But for anyone, I think you get issues if you're a Google uni and you try and use Teams. I don't know if anyone else had the same experience, but it does. They don't like each other and they don't play nicely. But it might be just it might be. I'm quite envious sometimes of people who are Microsoft unis and have access to all this stuff. No offense, Google.
okay. Have I missed any questions? Does anyone have any more that maybe I've somehow scrolled past? I think I found.
I think I actually spotted a question somewhere in there.
Okay.
I can't find it anymore. But someone's asking if the students like it. Have it gotten any
Yes.
feedback?
Yes.
And
Feedback. Yes.
like I said, this was a demo portfolio that I created specifically for this session. However, I've used its ancestor in my previous institution, Coventry University London, who are always very open to innovation. So hats off to them. And we've used a version of this, and students we got really good feedback from students. We got a lot of feedback saying portfolio is very time consuming and I don't want to do it because they just don't want to put in the work. But then we started, once you start making it count in a way that is visible to students, as students know that there is something coming out of it, we got a lot more positive feedback. And I also got positive feedback from tutors saying that it's easy to manage and it's easy to mark. And I didn't use the whole system. I use, like I said, it's ancestor. So a little, some feedback, but not on the whole build that I showed you today.
Just a note that I've put the feedback form link once again in the chat room. We would love to hear from you. I know Christiana would enjoy to hear what you have taken away from today's session, and we would love to know how we can develop webinars or select webinars that are most useful to our members. So please take a moment to fill in the survey if you haven't done so yet, and thank you to those who have.
Thanks, everyone. I'm just going to stop the recording. Thanks, Christiana. Yeah, and so I'm going to stop the recording now. So final farewell to everyone on YouTube. So we are